chapter 21. It was then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw in a vision the holy city, the new Jerusalem, descending from heaven, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. As I listened, I heard a loud voice saying, "Look now, God's abode is among all people. He will reside with them. They shall be his people, and God himself will be their truth and life. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death cries, no more mourning or pain, for the old order of things has passed. Seated on the throne, God will make all things new." Then the Lord said, "Write this down, for these words are true and trusted." It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who have strived will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children and heirs. These words can bring us new life. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Anne. Hope against hope. Hope can be such an elusive thing. Most of us at some time have seen it come into our lives, and we've also seen it leave our lives. It doesn't mean that we suddenly become despondent or bereft, but there are times when we don't feel the same kind of joy about life as we did once. Nor is it something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. Hope is rather just that which is a part of our being, but it can be hidden. It's more like a foundation to all that we do. It grounds us, sustains us, gives us a sense that there is something worthwhile in life. The Apostle Paul writes several times about hope. First, in his letter to the church at Rome, and this is where the title of this sermon comes from. Against all hope, he writes, Abraham in hope believed, and so he became the father of many nations. As it has been said, so shall your offspring be. Against all hope. It seemed impossible, something which could not be achieved. The father of Judaism and Christianity and Islam established this way of being in the world, not primarily by a belief system or some divine plan, but by the simple experience of hope. And it was said that it was hope against what one might hope for. This was not a certainty, nor hope, we should see, is not a lazy person's way of assurance of conviction. Later, Paul says a blessing to the gathering at the Church of Rome. He writes, "May the God of hope fill you with joy and peace, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of your Spirit." Flowing over with hope seems such a big task and such a big ask. Hope and grasping for the impossible. For those who embrace the way of Jesus, the Christian faith, we are surrounded by the stuff of everyday life, what some have called the possible, planning for the future, time with the family and time with friends, our work, our leisure, and so forth, things that we might regard as rather mundane. And that's where we live. That's where we are. That's where we find our purpose and our meaning. And there are many ways in which we can do this. And yet, a deeper and more profound level as religious and spiritual people, the people of God. We are people who are impassioned and moved by a love that leaves us restless, panting like a deer for running streams, as the psalmist writes in Psalm 42. As I've mentioned, hope is not certainty of future inevitability. Don't listen to the televangelist who will promise you the world while he picks your back pocket at the same time. Hope is more of a vision of what is only possible in an impossible way. A few more well-worn reminders from the Scriptures. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, from Hebrews. Do you know that wisdom is planted in your soul? If you find it, there will be a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Now, hope is seen, and that which is seen is not hope. Who hopes for what they already have? And a marvellous poetic expression of hope. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They shall soar with wings like eagles, and they will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. A picture of the power of sustaining hope. And yet hope still remains elusive. In many ways it is the hidden ground of daily living, and it's only revealed when we begin to seek the impossible, that which is often beyond human grasp. Perhaps it's when something completely new and even unimaginable is required that hope appears, a transformed future or a vision of what could be but isn't presently seen. Perhaps an example of this is the post-COVID society, where the powerful will perhaps be in a different situation from the powerless. Who knows? We can only hope for that. Perhaps it might be a future where there is less greed and grasping, and perhaps cures for the poor and the dispossessed. Is that wishful thinking? Is it fantasy? Is it optimism? Or is it hope that we can actually embrace that which we presently regard as impossible? The often impenetrable book of Revelation concludes with the vision that we heard Anne read a little earlier. And from the author's eye, it's all about hope. As the first chapter tells us, this narrative is prophetic, it's poetic, it's a vision. It's a vision of what can inspire us during difficult times, what can give us a sense of hope, even when things do seem hopeless. We're having our study on Tuesday nights on this book, and we're looking at it particularly as it can be understood and read within the 21st century. Let me just quote a few verses from it. There is coming a new heaven and a new earth, a vision of a holy city, the new Jerusalem. God abides with his people, wiping the tears from their eyes, mourning and pain from their hearts. For the old ways are passing, and all is being renewed. Water will be given to the thirsty without cost, because it comes from the life-giving spring. So strive, therefore, to inherit what is already provided for you. Let us hope together. Is this the impossible dream? A vision that motivates us, perhaps, in times of our despair, our despondency, our dependence, or perhaps it gives us a sense that there is something beyond when we can only see sheer boredom. I believe so. Unfortunately for us, hope often comes from suffering. Again, St. Paul writes, endurance produces character, character produces hope. Hope breeds hope. Just as love gives birth to love and faith grows in us when we open our hearts and our minds and our hands to the call of God. And the remarkable thing is that we can still be hopeful when the outcomes aren't that favourable for us. To hope doesn't mean that everything will turn out the way we want it to be. Surely wisdom demands that we don't get everything we want, and we can be grateful to God for that. That not all of our desires, all of our longings, all of our needs, all of our wishes, they won't be necessarily met or come to fruition. That would be a scary thought in itself. But rather, hopefulness is a very state of being, a way we can be in the world. My sense is that we really should turn this noun, hope, into a verb. I think it's better to say, and to say regularly to oneself, I am a hopeful person. Now, you may not believe it at first, but as we say it, it takes root in us more and more. I am a loving person. I am a faithful person. I am a compassionate person. You may feel a bit of a fraud at the beginning because you may not feel hopeful or loving or faithful or compassionate. But practicing it each day begins to take root, as I've said, within our very being. Say it to yourself, and then with God's grace, it may become true for you. Let me just end with a few words from Emily Dickinson's poem on hope. Words that have sustained me and sustained others. It's a tangible image of hope. Emily Dickinson wrote these words: hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Let me say those words again. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. May we all be hopeful in these difficult times and hope even for the impossible, that when we are able to find a new way, that new way will give us life, revitalising our spirit and move us in new and, at the moment, unseeable directions. May hope be with you. Amen.